All right, welcome everyone. I'm glad to welcome our audience to our next Strong Youth Project interview. I'm happy to welcome Michaela Gent, who is a student assistant in the Strong Youth program. And I'm also happy to welcome Dr. Cara Duraccio to our interview today. Dr. Duraccio is a psychologist who knows a lot about sleep, and that's the topic of our interview today. Personally, I've been reading a lot about sleep over the last few months. I actually got a new watch for Christmas, and it's a Garmin Phoenix 6. So I got lots of data every day, and I have to admit, the first thing I check when I wake up these days is my Garmin sleep score, and I like to look at my sleep patterns. I have no clue how accurate it is, Cara, but it's changed the way I approach my sleep, and I actually feel better. I used to be an early morning person. I used to wake up an hour or two earlier than I have in the last few months, and I've been sleeping longer lately, and I've enjoyed it. So sleep has been on my mind. I was just reading an article this morning about professional football, and the article wandered into sleep. The author of the article called Sleep the Next Frontier in Performance Science. And so I know that, I don't know if you did this purposefully, Cara, or serendipitously, but it seems that you're in a fertile field of science.
Just a matter of luck, I guess.
Yeah. So as way of just a very brief introduction, Dr. Duraccio has earned 3 degrees, all from Brigham Young University, all in psychology, culminating in a PhD in clinical psychology. And I studied her CV in preparation for this article, and it seems like you're all things sleep. It looks like you study the effects of sleep on nutrition and diet, the effects of sleep on healthy weight maintenance and mood. Mm-hmm. So I'm eager to be able to ask you some questions about sleep.
I love it,
Cara, personally and for the Strong Youth Project. So in preparation, just before our interview, Michaela and I were talking about the questions we can ask, and I think Michaela may have what I find to be the most interesting question. So I told Michaela she could go first. So Michaela, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I'd love to. So I've actually been reading a lot of articles on sleep too, and one thing they constantly bring up is circadian rhythm. So my question is, what is circadian rhythm and why is it important?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And it's interesting because my research in the past has focused a lot on how much we sleep. And most recently, I've shifted a little bit to focusing more on timing of sleep. And that really gets into the circadian rhythm thing. So I think about circadian rhythm as kind of like an internal clock that all of us have. Basically, every cell in our body has a circadian rhythm. But what probably the articles are talking about is our internal circadian rhythm, or our internal timing, where our body naturally wants to go to bed and wake up. So more simply put, like, you probably have heard the terms like night owl or morning lark, right? What are you, Michaela?
More recently, I've actually been a morning person. So
yes. Okay. So I'm definitely a morning lark to my core. I wake up at 5:30 every day and I love it. I thrive best in the mornings. And that has so much to do with that internal circadian rhythm, that internal circadian timing. And so what a lot of research has been pushing recently is it's not enough just to simply say, get enough sleep. What we're finding is that sleeping in congruence with that internal circadian rhythm, that clock, is leading to better outcomes than, say, if I try to get 8 hours, but I'm trying to sleep like a night owl when I'm a morning lark. That just might not do the same thing for me as sleeping in a way that's congruent with that internal timing of my body.
Can I jump in, Cara? So this actually, I promise not to refer to my watch nonstop in this interview, but
I love it though.
My watch tells me that I get more REM sleep during the times that I used to be awake in the morning, and subjectively, I would agree with that. It seems like I am getting better sleep, and for me, it's like between 5 and 6, and maybe even up to 7 a.m. If I can confess to the public world that I'm still asleep at 7 a.m. But so does that fit? Does that fit with what you understand?
Totally. So like, let's say in the past you went to bed, but you woke yourself up maybe earlier than your internal clock wanted. we know that REM sleep happens the most at the end of the night. So you're trimming off that REM sleep in order to wake up early, and maybe with the hope that you'd be more productive or get things done before the family wakes up. But by letting your body sleep in congruence with your internal rhythms, it's able to get that full, rich REM at the very end. And this is so critical when we talk about teens, okay? So we think about teens and their internal clocks, when teens go through puberty, most actually shift 2 hours later into the day. So they're not feeling tired now 2 hours later into the evening, closer to midnight or 1, and they're not ready to wake up till closer to 8 or 9 in the morning. So when we effectively have teens wake up early for school, early for sports, what are we cutting out? We're cutting out that rich REM sleep. And we have teens who are habitually sleep deprived and getting really poor timed sleep. And so we see a lot of negative outcomes because of that. But
what are some of the implications of that, Kara, the negative outcomes?
Pick anything. Academic performance goes down, sports performance goes down, reaction time goes down, dietary decision making gets worse. Teens are more likely to be sedentary during the day. I often joke, I'm like, pick any outcome in the world, and chances are it gets worse when we're not getting adequate and well-timed sleep.
Excellent. So can I conclude then that someone who's interested in athletic performance should be aware of their circadian rhythm?
Absolutely.
And so what's the solution though? Well, first of all, I'd ask, how can one become more aware of their circadian rhythm? Is there, does everyone need a watch, an expensive watch, or what?
No, not necessarily. People are pretty good at, so the gold standard method of figuring out circadian rhythms is you measure when the body naturally secretes melatonin. And there's fancy methodologies that we could talk about if we want. But what we know is that the best way to try to predict when melatonin secretes is you just simply ask people, what time would your body naturally want to go to bed and wake up in a world without restraints? Like, you don't have school in the morning. There's not a Netflix show to binge tonight. Like, what time would your body just naturally go to bed? And what time would your body naturally wake up? And people are pretty good at knowing when their body feels the best in terms of going to bed and waking up in the morning. Similar questions you can ask are, when do you perform the best during the day? Like, if you had to do a really hard task where you have to focus really hard, maybe write, are you going to do it the best in the morning? Or are you going to do it the best in the evening? And if someone says the morning, well, that gives us a good signal that maybe they're more of that morning lark tendency. They say, oh, definitely like 10 or 11 p.m. Well, we know that they're more of that night owl tendency. But I give people a lot of credit. They're pretty good at predicting what time their body naturally is starting to wind down.
That's interesting.
I have a question with that. I know some people who it seems like they can sleep forever, like 12, 13 hours in a night. And so I guess my question is there such thing as getting too much sleep? Because are like they just following their circadian rhythm, or is that like bad for them? That's just what I want to know. So
there's a rare disorder where people do get what we would consider too much sleep. But most of the time, when you see folks who can sleep 12 or 13 hours a night, if I had to take a guess as what's happening is they are chronically sleep deprived. And when they finally have the opportunity to get a full night's rest, they're engaging in what we call rebound sleep, where they're getting more sleep over the course of several nights in an attempt to make up the sleep that they've lost. Okay. There is a subset of people, very like, I don't even know, probably less than 1% of the population who could habitually sleep 12 or 13 hours. And by people, I mean adults. Kids, we can talk about how much sleep they should be getting. But adults typically just need somewhere between 7 to 9 hours a night. If they're sleep deprived, you might find for a week, maybe 2, they can sleep 12, 13 hours. There's a really interesting study that just came out where they took a group of people, they put them in a lab, they let them sleep however much they want. No surprise, the first several nights they were sleeping closer to 10, 11 hours. And then over time, they fell down towards that 8, 9 hour range. And so my guess is if you have folks who you know are sleeping a lot, they're probably getting rebound sleep. It's just hard for the human body, adult body, to get more than 9 hours of sleep, 10 hours of sleep consistently over time. Eventually, your body falls into that natural getting what it needs.
So, Karen, can I ask a related question? I suspect that physical activity levels influence the number of hours you need to sleep. So if someone's training especially hard during a certain part of the season, are they going to need more sleep than otherwise?
So I think the jury's still out on that one. Some people think yes, that they might need more sleep. What the research consistently says is if you're physically active, especially engaging in vigorous physical activity, you're going to fall asleep quicker and you're going to have more efficient sleep. You're not going to be spending as much time awake throughout the night. And so by nature, you might be getting just a little bit more sleep because of how efficient it is. But whether or not we actually need more sleep, the jury's still out. I think we do. I think that athletes, especially athletes who are engaging in intense, vigorous activity throughout the day, are going to naturally find that if they give themselves the opportunity, they're going to sleep more. And
Excellent.
likely because their body needs it.
Is that additional? Is it better to get that additional sleep? I know Michaela and I have talked. We've spoken about naps previously. Is it more effective to get the additional sleep all in one shot in the nighttime?
Yes.
Okay, so naps are not as effective as just
not
getting
as
more sleep at night.
effective. Sometimes, like let's talk about adolescence again. Sometimes teens just don't have the chance to get the full night sleep that they need. Because their body's not ready to go to bed till midnight or 1. They have to wake up for 6 or 7 a.m. either for school or sports. And so in those situations, then I say, well, let's build in a nap because your body needs this sleep and it's probably going to do better with a little nap than if we don't have a nap at all. But naps are tricky because if you time them wrong or if they're too long, then it can actually make night sleep worse. And then we get into this vicious cycle where teens aren't ready to go to bed till really late in the night, only getting a handful of hours at night, relying on those daytime naps, and then it gets a little squishy. And so that might be something you talk to your primary care provider or a sleep expert about because you want to just make sure that if they are napping, it's at the right time during the day and not too long.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. Being a college student,
I know.
I probably get like 5 or 6 hours of sleep, and then I wake up, I go to all my morning classes, and then I cannot function if I do not get an hour and a half nap in, and then I'm good to stay up till like midnight.
Yeah.
But I'm definitely in that vicious cycle, and I need to work.
It's hard to break. It takes a consistent few weeks of no naps. If you have the opportunity, if any adult teen has the opportunity to get the full amount of sleep that they need in the night, that's always best. But sometimes because of work schedules, school schedules, you got to do what you got to do. And we just try to get as much sleep as we can across that 24-hour period.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say like a 5 or 6 hour nap, Michaela. That's what I thought college students do. So.
I wish I could get that long of a nap.
Yeah. So I want to ask a really practical question, Kara. I don't want our time to run out before I have the chance. And I don't think I'm the only person who has this question. I'm constantly battling my adolescent children. I'm a parent of several adolescents. And it's the old school in me. I want them to go to bed early. They don't want to go to bed early. And it sounds like that might be okay based on what I've learned this morning. But I still worry that some kids probably stay up later than they should.
Yeah.
What are some practical, I don't know if there's such a thing here, but do you have any practical advice for parents who are trying to get their kids to go to bed earlier than the kids want to?
Yeah, or they're before their bodies are ready to, right? And I think the struggle that
should you even fight that battle? It would be one question. If their bodies aren't ready to go to sleep, they don't physiologically need the sleep. Do you think you should fight that battle?
Yes. And I'll give you some strategies that I have worked with parents because you are not alone in this. I would say what you're experiencing, parents across the nation are experiencing. And it's because we often talk about adolescence as that quote unquote perfect storm of getting bad sleep because we've got the body changes that we were talking about in terms of going to bed later. And then we've got the fact that we've got teens who are developmentally building or are getting more autonomy. So they have more choice about when they go to bed. And so that's where we feel this tug of war with parents. And then we've got things like social media, increased academic demands, increased school performance demands. And so we're often feeling like this tension between parents and teens because teens are just not getting the sleep that they need. Everybody knows it. We don't know what to do about it. So my recommendations are, number one, we try to eliminate some of those things that might be keeping teens up, which is technology. And so I often talk about the whole family, including parents, having a technology curfew. So at 9 o'clock at night, we have a central place. We all plug in our phones. The TVs get turned off. The Wi-Fi gets turned off. So if anyone's sneaky, they can't get the good stuff, right? Everything gets checked in. So that at least one of those things that are making it less likely that teens are going to go to sleep is gone. But as a parent, you have to be willing to follow through on this too, and that's hard.
Hard's an understatement.
I know, but you just think for the greater good. And
yeah, it's a major battle.
Better. Everyone's going to benefit from it, right?
Yeah, good. I love it.
But then the second thing is, what I often tell parents is, I'm like, okay, what time is your kid naturally falling asleep anyway? Let's say it's 11. You're wanting them to get in bed at 9:30, but even if they get in bed, screens are off, they're just laying in bed for an hour and a half. From a sleep perspective, that actually is going to hurt their sleep over time, more than if we just let the teen get into bed at 11 and then experience what it's like to get in bed, close their eyes, and fall asleep in a healthy amount of time, which is less than 20, 30 minutes, let's say. If we have a teen get in bed at like 9:30 and they're staying awake for an hour and a half, what that can actually do is rebound and cause them insomnia. It's called like induced hyperarousal. So they start to associate the bed with tossing, turning, thinking, staying awake. And over time, it can lead to worse sleep outcomes. We want them to get in bed and go right to sleep. Now, if a teen can get in bed at 9:30 and go right to sleep, of course, that's something that we should be promoting, encouraging our teen to do. But if you're finding your teen, even when they get in bed, they're like, but I can't sleep. I say, let your teen get into bed at a time that they feel tired. And then let them do that for a few weeks. And then every week, just shift that time 15 minutes earlier into the evening. Okay, it was 11. Now for the next week, it's going to be 10:45. Now for the next week, it's going to be 10:30. And what you're doing is you're letting that internal clock naturally adjust to shifting earlier. We're not doing this rapid swing, just like if we were to go to a different time zone and try to get in bed early and we couldn't do it. We're slowly adjusting that internal clock, and then we hold it steady.
So yeah, I like that a lot. I love the systematic approach. I don't know if there's a good answer for this question, but at what point do you trust your teen and his or her perception of their circadian rhythm to dictate?
Yeah. So there's a number of things that you could do. So if you have a device like a Fitbit, you can get a cheap Fitbit online. If you want to do a device to kind of be the third-party scientific, like we're going to let the device figure out when you're naturally falling asleep and waking up, and we're going to use that. So like what I do as when I work with teens in my sleep clinic is I have them just do a sleep diary for 2 weeks. And then they give me that sleep diary and I say, okay, 100% of the nights you're asleep by midnight. 75% of the nights you're asleep by 11:30. So let's say maybe 11:45 is the time that we're going to set as your bedtime, because at 11, only 10% of the nights you were asleep, right? So 11:45 now is our bedtime. And then we do that slow and steady shift backwards. So some sort of data diary, if you don't want to pay money, you can find sleep diaries for free online. If you want to get a device, teens love learning more about themselves. I often find that by getting a small, cheap device, they get buy-in, and they like just like your experience, right? Of getting that sleep score, learning more about their sleep, trying to best their previous night's best sleep. Sometimes a device can go a long way. But some sort of method of tracking sleep for a couple weeks, seeing what's happening in the quote unquote real world, and then saying, this looks like the time that you're almost every night you are asleep by. So we're going to say that's your new bedtime. And then we're going to slowly over time shift it earlier until you're getting at least a solid 8-hour opportunity each night. Ideally for me, for teens, I want 9 hours. But sometimes school start times just make that impossible. So we just shoot for 8 and hope for the best.
Do you have a specific recommendation for an inexpensive and trustworthy device? Is there such thing out there?
Yeah. So the Fitbit Ultras, I think they're called, but they're like $70. I know that is pricey for some families, but not compared to things like Apple Watches, Google Watches, Garmin's. And if you shop sales, sometimes you can see them dip down into like the $40, $50 range. Alternatively, you can shop Facebook Marketplace, or some of these secondhand sites and find cheap devices that way.
I had a thought.
Mhm.
When you were talking earlier about how it's not good for a kid to go to bed before they're ready to go to bed, because then they associate their bed with just tossing and turning.
Mhm.
Is it not good to, for example, do schoolwork in bed, or even just do any other activity in bed besides sleeping?
Yep, you are right on the money. So any activity that we do in bed outside of sleep, the way I explain it to youth is it just confuses our brain. And the way that I sometimes talk about it is I think about it like a spin the wheel, right? So if all that I'm doing when I am in bed is maybe there's a little bit of that wheel that's me trying to fall asleep, but the rest is just sleep. And I spin the wheel, the likelihood that that little arrow is going to land in the sleep category, it's highly likely, right? So when I get in bed, my brain's like, oh yeah, the only thing I ever do in here is sleep. Spin that wheel, I'm falling asleep. But if I'm watching Netflix in bed, if I'm reading books, texting friends, doing homework, tossing and turning, like the more things that we do when we fill up that wheel with alternative activities and then we spin the wheel at nighttime when we get into bed, our brain's like, well, what? Maybe I'm going to be watching Netflix and we don't fall asleep. Okay, well, maybe I'm texting friends right now and we don't fall asleep. So we want to condition the brain that when we're in bed, the only thing we're doing is sleeping, or at least attempting to sleep. And that's going to increase the likelihood that when we get into bed, our brain's like, oh, I know what's happening right now. And it switches off and we're able to go to sleep.
So then good advice would be, as soon as you get up in the morning, don't go back to bed till you're ready to go to sleep.
You got it. Yep.
Okay.
Only use the bed for sleep is the sleep hygiene recommendation that you'll see everywhere. And I'm sure we've all heard it. But yeah, it's a tried and true, because what we're trying to do is condition ourselves basically to know that when I get into bed, it's for one thing and one thing only. And it's so effective. Research has showed again and again. It's the first go-to, especially in teens. And it's tricky because teens, it's their haven. A lot of teens spend a lot of time in bed because they feel like it's their safe spot in the house, the place that they have privacy, their oasis. So we often talk about how can we build an oasis outside of bed. Maybe it's right next to the bed and we get a bunch of pillows and blankets and make a comfy corner. And giving them a similar type of place to relax and rest and do the things they need to do, but not in a space where they would ever sleep.
Yeah.
Adolescents are going to love that advice, right, Michaela? You all always practice that.
Yeah, I actually do all of my homework in bed too. So all around, I'm just not too good at the sleep thing right now, but I want to get better. So I'm glad
Everybody's that way. Everyone's that way. My favorite thing to do is I have a list of 10 sleep hygiene recommendations. And whenever I give presentations, I put them on the board and I say, I want you to count up how many you're doing. And then at the end, I have people raise their hands and I can tell you no one ever is a 10 out of 10. I sometimes have a few 9 out of 10ers, but most are in that like 4 to 7 range where they're doing some. And the thing about sleep hygiene is we know that you don't have to have 10 out of 10 to have good sleep. But if you're having bad sleep, that sometimes adding a few of those sleep hygienes on can make the difference. So you don't necessarily, like maybe you're doing homework in bed, but at nighttime you're able to fall asleep quickly, get a good night of sleep, wake up. Then I wouldn't say, well, don't do homework in bed anymore because you're sleeping fine. But if suddenly you're finding it's harder to fall asleep, you're really restless in the night, you're thinking about schoolwork while laying in bed, then I'd be like, well, let's maybe move the homework out of bed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Actually, one other question I had, and I think I read this in another research article. Does eating right before bed have an effect on sleep?
If it's a big meal. If it's a snack, not so much.
Okay. Good to know. Because I like to snack before bed too.
So do I. It's my guilty habit. I do it every day. And I tell myself, today's the day. I'm not going to eat a giant bowl of chips and salsa right before bed. And it always happens. Yeah, as long as it's not too much. That circadian rhythm we were talking about, lots of things influence it. The biggest one is light. That's why we always hear over and over, don't use your phone in bed. But another one is meal timing. So when we eat a really big meal right before bed, what we're doing is we're telling the body like, oh, that was dinner.
Oh,
So
okay.
bed is coming in a few hours. And so that can shift that internal clock a little bit later and make it trickier to fall asleep right after.
Got it.
Similar thing goes with exercise. So some recent research has showed that exercise right before bed actually isn't as harmful as we once thought. Even up to like an hour before bed has been shown not to really impact sleep in adults. I don't know as much about in teens, but yeah.
So, Kara, I'm super curious. I don't know if we have time for this, and I'm putting you on the spot, but what are some of the items on your 10-item checklist for sleep hygiene? Are you able
Oh,
to share
sure.
those with us today?
Yeah, let's see how many I can remember off the top of my head. So only
Sure.
using your bed for sleep, no screens in the hour before sleep, going to bed and waking up at the same time every night and morning, even on the weekends. Having a room that's cool and dark and quiet. Let's see, not eating too right before bed.
Unless
Uh,
it's chips and salsa.
unless it's chips and salsa. No caffeine after 2 p.m. Sorry. Um, for adults, it's things like avoiding substances right before bed. How many more can I remember?
You've done pretty good.
I know, I'm pretty proud of that. I got a 70%, 7 out of 10.
That's
Those
great.
are the ones I think I talk about the most.
All right, can we switch gears just a little bit? I know you're an expert on this, so I want to spend at least a few, and we're pressed for time as we always are.
That's fine.
But you're an expert on, from what I understand, you know a lot about the intersection between nutrition and sleep.
Yeah.
Both are important for young athletes and young people in general. Can you give us a, maybe a 2, 3, 4 minute introductory lecture on how sleep influences nutrition
Sure.
and vice versa?
Sure. Yeah, I got really interested in this in college during my graduate degree because I was chronically sleep restricted. And what I started noticing is that when on the nights that I did not get great sleep, I was eating terrible the next day. I was eating donuts and, all sorts of sugary things. And I started to ask myself, well, is this because I'm not getting good sleep? And so I got to do a really fun study that I've replicated a few times, which is basically take a group of teens, have them sleep for a whole week, only 5 hours a night or 6 hours a night, then have them sleep a whole week, getting healthy amounts of sleep, 8, 9 hours a night. And then we track what they ate. And no surprise, they're gravitating towards foods that we would consider calorically dense, sugar sweetened beverages, sweets. We actually didn't find, most research actually finds we're not eating a ton more calories during the day, like 100 or 200 calories, maybe more a day. But it's really just we're eating foods that are just not great for our bodies, these highly processed foods. In adults are even worse. They actually do end up eating hundreds more calories during the day, and as well as foods that are just not great for our bodies. And so, yeah, I think it really leads to this question of like, what is it about sleep and dietary decision making? And so I was able to use this really fun task in an MRI scanner where we show flashes of images of food, and 70% of them are healthy: broccoli, celery, apples. 30% are unhealthy. My go-to things like donuts, French fries, right? And we tell them, press this button when you see healthy foods, but don't press it when you see unhealthy foods. And sure enough, when teens are getting short sleep, they're less accurate. They press that button way more during the unhealthy food trials. And if we look at the regions of their brain that are lighting up, the reward regions when they're sleep deprived are just fireworking. They find foods to be what we infer is that they're finding foods to be so much more rewarding when they're sleep deprived. And what I think is happening is that when we're tired, we are gravitating towards these foods that are going to give us energy and give us energy fast. And then, of course, what we know about these foods is it leads to a crash, which makes us more tired. So we're going to eat more of those foods. And just throughout the day, we're accumulating these high energy foods that ultimately can lead to things like obesity, cardiometabolic disease. And some people argue, well, okay, that's an experimental manipulation. How does that relate to the real world? Well, if you look at how much sleep teens are actually getting, most teens are getting, on average during the school week, about 6.5 hours, maybe 7 a night. And so these experimental manipulations are made, they were designed with teens in mind. We're like, we're going to do something. We're going to pick conditions that actually mirror what teens are doing. And so it actually has a really broad real world application, which is teens, if they keep up these patterns of short sleep, they're going to be choosing most likely foods that are really unhealthy for their body in the long run.
Fantastic. Uh, it seems like poor sleep impairs your judgment related
Mm-hmm.
to many
Yeah.
important parts of life, including
Yeah.
nutrition.
Yeah. One of my favorite tasks we did is we had this task where we had teens pick like their favorite food, Hershey bar, let's say. And when they were sleep deprived versus well rested, we said, okay, now how many servings of this Hershey bar would you eat if it was free? Right? We're seeing like how much they would eat. This hypothetical task. Okay, what if it was a penny? What was if it was $1, $5, $10, $20, $100? And what we found as teens, when they're tired, they're like, I would pay $100 for that Hershey bar. But when they're well rested, they're like, no, I'll pay $2. That's how much I could get it in a grocery store. Like they're just willing to pay higher amounts for longer and eat more at those higher amounts when they're sleep deprived. They want that food and they want it bad. And so, yeah, decision making, inhibitory control, that ability to inhibit in order to meet a goal, that just goes out the window when we're sleep deprived.
All right, so yeah, this is all good stuff. I want to ask at least one more question, and then
Okay.
we'll turn you loose, Carol. I think we've given a lot of fantastic advice to parents.
Mm-hmm.
Can we switch gears and perhaps talk to coaches for just a few
Sure.
minutes? If you're a coach of a youth sports team and you want to improve the likelihood that your adolescent athletes are getting good sleep,
Mm-hmm.
what would you tell this coach? What are some good practical strategies that she or he might employ
with their athletes as it relates to sleep?
Yeah, what are they going to tell them before and after practice? Can they set up any programs, or you have any ideas for coaches who are trying to promote good sleep alongside of the parents?
Yeah, I love it. And I think I love this question because I think the more that teens can keep getting this message that sleep is important for their overall health, well-being, performance, the more they're going to buy into it. And I know that teens respect coaches. And so I think one is just giving teens that information and just saying, listen, we practiced a lot today. Like, let's say I'm not a sporty person, which might speak to my, I don't know how qualified I am to answer these questions, but let's say like we're practicing a certain throw or a certain play and we're trying to ingrain this into our muscle memory. It's like, you want to remember this tomorrow when we practice, you need to get a full night's sleep, because if you cut off that REM sleep in the morning, you're not going to get that muscle memory consolidation. So you need to sleep 8 hours tonight. Or maybe coaches build in like an incentive program, like, okay, I want you to sleep diary track your night every night. And for teens who at least 4 nights out of the school week can get 8 hours of sleep, you get whatever, I don't know, some sort of reward or some sort of, maybe they don't have to run an extra lap or something along those lines, right? Just trying to incentivize, giving some sort of external motivation, as well as giving them knowledge to foster that internal motivation to try to get more sleep. The more approaches that we can take, parents are incentivizing it using internal and external, coaches are, teachers are, school districts are. I think that it's going to take this joint effort to get teens to get that full amount of sleep.
Yeah, for sure. I like what you said, and I completely agree. As a parent and a coach, actually, I can tell my kids a lot of things. It's not heard. Yeah, exactly. And I'm thinking of one youth coach right now who could tell my son, he could tell him anything and my son would do it in a heartbeat without even thinking about it. So
there's so much respect for it. I just was working on with a teen on improving his sleep, and he's a soccer player, and his number one motivation was, I want to be better at soccer. And it was so fun to watch his sleep improve and then hear his self-reported improvement about soccer. He's like, oh my gosh, I am the best athlete I've ever been. And it was such an amazing buy-in. Like once he got that taste that, hey, as sleep got better, my performance got better, like his improvement in his sleep and his willingness to prioritize sleep over other things just skyrocketed. And so sometimes I feel like that internal motivation, we need that external motivation to get the hook. And then once they start seeing the real world implications of, oh, wow, I didn't fall asleep in school, I'm getting A's on tests better, my shot accuracy is going up. Like that's what teens need. And then they're bought in.
Yeah, fantastic. So you can, just to be clear, I hope we've established this thus far, but you can promise the kids in the audience that better sleep will improve physical performance?
Oh yeah, I think time and time again, research is showing it. Reaction time, physical performance, accuracy, ability to make quick decisions. All of those things get better when teens are getting good sleep, when all youth are getting good sleep, regardless. It could be school-age children, youth, adults. It gets better. So sleep more. Everyone needs to sleep more.
Fantastic. All right, Michaela, do you have any other questions? We've taken almost 40 minutes. I told Kara we'd take 30.
Oh, you're fine.
No, I think everything you shared was awesome, and I'm definitely going to start working on my sleep now. I feel very so motivated. So
oh, good.
Yeah. So I like to summarize things at the end of these things, Kara. Tell me if I've missed anything really important. So we started out talking about circadian rhythm. I've learned a lot, by the way. I've learned a lot. This is going to change the way I parent. We talked about circadian rhythm, and it sounds like everyone's circadian rhythm is a little different. So we probably should cut each other some slack regarding sleep habits and trust that yours might be different from mine. Something I found interesting, it sounds like it changes somewhere in adolescence. It shifts later, an hour or two for most people, which I found to be interesting. I've learned that there are lots of different ways to motivate good sleep today, right? It sounds like something really simple like a sleep diary may be super effective. And then there's lots of cool device. I'm a device guy, Kara. So when you talked about device, gosh, I said it before, but this device I have on my wrist right now has really changed the way I think. And frankly, I could have had numerous experts tell me the information that I'm getting from my device, but I probably wouldn't have listened as carefully had it come from a human being. So I probably shouldn't admit that, but it's true. So devices can be a great way to go, but it's important to motivate kids to start to establish good sleep habits. And there's lots of different ways, it sounds like. We've learned today that sleep can influence nutrition, and nutrition influences sleep. So I think that was interesting as well. Have I missed any major points, Michaela or Kara? Any other take-home messages that I've missed?
No, I think that sums it all up pretty good. So.
All right. Well, thanks, Kara. I think I'm going to be a better parent for having heard this interview. And I say that sincerely. So I can't wait to share the information with Kira and my kids as well. Yeah. Especially that advice you gave on long naps. I can't wait to show that part to my college age daughter. It's going to be some good ammo for me.
Actually, it's going to go so well though.
That's right. So, well, thanks, Kara, for your time. I really appreciate it. Thanks, Michaela, for being here. And with that, we'll go ahead and conclude.